Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm here with Josh Pigford, a serial maker and founder of Baremetrics. He works on tons of projects at any one time, some quirky, others look like they're just for fun. But today we want to talk about the subject of trying out things, especially when they don't work, and making tough decisions to stop working on a particular project when the data just doesn't point towards success. So thanks very much, Josh, for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Robert.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit about Intros, this product that you and the Baremetrics team had been working on? What was it originally that prompted you to think about making it?
Yeah, so with Baremetrics, and sort of the short there is that we provide like business analytics for companies. So, monthly recurring revenue, lifetime value, churn, just stuff around their revenue primarily. And started that about 5 years ago. And, even 5 years ago, we were getting contacted from investors and people who were looking to buy companies, like basically looking for us to play middleman to connect companies and people who would be interested in either investing or buying them. So, I've always I would intro people when it made sense and put companies in contact with other people, but we were kind of looking to formalize that a bit, or at least streamline it, sort of provide, the idea with Intros was that we would be this marketplace for companies to opt in, have their data listed anonymously, so that investors or buyers could kind of filter through different companies that kind of met their, the type of companies that they would be interested in. So like, maybe you're interested in a company that's doing under $10,000 a month in revenue and they're in the pet space or something like that. So yeah, then they could find these companies. They're not having to go do a bunch of digging. Like we've got empirical proof of their data here. This isn't like the company just listed a number and it's now outdated, or it's like kind of fudged a bit. Like it's the actual data. So that was the idea. We built it and launched it a few months ago.
So what what kind of work did you do to begin with in terms of like working on how you'd price it, how who would be the one paying for it, and also like what was most important to that target?
Yeah, so we initially, when we had the idea of building this sort of marketplace, we mocked it up on the design side, like built an interactive mock-up. So specifically used like InVision to, so you could click through it and then kind of try to make it feel as much like a real app as possible. So did that, and then just started hopping on phone calls. So we made some assumptions about what people would want.
Sure.
Which is, that's like any kind of product starts with a certain level of assumption. Yeah. So did that, hopped on a bunch of video chats to screen share what we had mocked up, just to kind of get an idea of like, hey, what are we missing here? Or do we have too much here? Do we have not enough? What do you think about it? And we would talk through pricing and things like that. And like, again, like we're starting just like pulling stuff out of thin air. On the pricing side, it wasn't so much that like we didn't do any like real research around what the price should be, as much as it was like we wanted to build a product that was worth say $500 a month. Like we were not trying to build something that, we would get tons of customers at a small price point. Like we wanted it to be sort of a premium thing. So that's where we started. And we were getting good feedback. I mean, 100% positive feedback on even the pricing. It was like, yeah, it's perfect. And that's where we had sort of started all that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. So what then, like between the InVision like mock-ups and the feedback there, and actually building what then took you to the decision to actually just build the whole thing, versus, I don't know, exploring like another way of validating it?
I mean, I think I think I'd had probably a dozen plus of these conversations. So like at that point, like we had certainly had some constructive feedback there and made some adjustments there, but like overall it was like, okay, this seems like pretty solid.
Sure.
Might as well build it. Because I mean, there comes a point where like,
Just
it's
gotta wait.
you don't have any real validation until there's money being
Yeah.
exchanged, and we wanted to have something there that they could like actually pay for. I mean, you could do the whole, pre-purchase kind of thing, but the reality was like, there's no way to
Yeah.
know it until you've got a thing that people can sign up for, pay for, and use.
Okay. Cool.
So that's when we decided to jump in.
So you launch it then, and you go back to those investors, and what happens?
Yeah. So we had those investors who we had done these screen shares with, and I mean, I think we had probably close to 100 investors that had reached out, like expressed interest, signed
Yeah.
up to get access. And so we started onboarding them, and when it came time to like, they could sift through all the data.
Yeah.
They could use the product, but it was all anonymous until they essentially, it's like said, until there's like a button where you request an intro with a company. And at that point, like they'd be prompted to put in a credit card so they could get non-anonymous data.
Sure.
And so we did that. I had almost 100 investors that we onboarded and couldn't get anybody to pay for it at all. We even like cut the price in half and still couldn't get anybody to pay for it.
And when you went back to them to try and figure that out, what did you find as the reason why?
The reason why, I mean, it was sort of varied. Really, I would just say excuses, but I mean, like,
Yeah.
What we found, like there wasn't anything that I felt was like addressable by us, really. To me, it's a problem with the investors. Like,
Yeah.
what we started finding was that like, investors in reality don't have much money to spend. They've got millions they can invest in companies, but that money is not available for them to use on like purchases like this.
Yeah.
And so most actually don't have much money to spend. And, it's like, I think VCs are wired to, because they're constantly getting pitches on products all day. And so their default is to act really interested in something. And then like, because that at least gives them optionality to like, if it is something they're really interested in, then they can invest in it. But like, they want to always feel like they're the good guy or look like the good guy. Yeah. So they'll always say something's great. And then they can always actually act on that by investing or not.
Yeah.
And in this case, they could provide all sorts of great feedback, say it's perfect, but they just wouldn't put down a credit card when it came down to it. And in addition to that, then there's just like a lot of investors have this idea that like they've got some like magical process for finding companies, and like to think that we could automate that with software kind of makes their job seem either irrelevant or obsolete, right? Yeah. And so I think there's probably some ego stuff wrapped up in that. And for like a junior associate at a big VC firm, the reality is like we could replace some like junior level VCs with this stuff. Yeah. So, it's like, so they're obviously in no way like interested in making themselves obsolete at their VC firm. So, all these things, it's like in hindsight, like, okay, that makes sense. Like maybe should have thought through that, or I don't know. I don't know how we would have like specifically figured that out ahead of time. But that's sort of what our takeaways were there on like why people wouldn't pay for it.
And so obviously you run into some resistance, and a lot of people would probably look at that and say, right, okay, let's try and pivot, or let's try and change something drastic. But you, I think it seems like we're very clear with yourself that nope, this is not going to happen. Right. And was that because it was just a brick wall? Was it because, as you were saying, like you didn't want to sacrifice the amount of value you think it was worth to make it a cheaper tool to waste your guys' time? Like, what went into the decision of we're not going to try and pivot this. We're just gonna stop.
Yeah, the prospect of, I guess, making a cheaper product wasn't interesting. I mean, in general, I'm not interested in having a high volume of customers at a low price.
Yeah.
So that wasn't interesting. Then just the idea of like constant, like trying to keep reframing this thing around the whole world of investors isn't interesting to me. Like, I mean, we have a couple of Baremetrics took on some investment back in 2015. We have a couple of investors. Like, we're in that space a little bit by default, but our customers are not investors, so it was like we just don't operate in that world really. And so, and I didn't have any interest in figuring out how to operate in that world.
Yeah.
So, you know, while it was sort of expensive from a time perspective of investing in building the product, I felt like it would have been more expensive and even riskier to keep trying to force it to work.
Yeah.
So it was like, cut your losses and move on.
Yeah.
And I was just in addition to that, the economics of it, the pure like interest in it wasn't really there to keep like trying to force this thing. So
Yeah.
so it was like, well, this wouldn't be fun to like keep trying, so let's not.
Well, and do you think that you kind of made that, like, so that was a very kind of quick, well thought out and kind of decisive decision?
Yeah.
Do you think that the ability to have that that kind of clarity comes from your background in making things, or do you think this was just a specific case? Like, are you that kind of a person usually? If it, you know, try it out, if give time box it very deliberately and then cut it or keep going?
So, I don't like. I certainly don't. I would not give myself a whole lot of credit on being really decisive on. Well, so you know, I think like historically, I've done a ton of projects over the years,
Yeah.
and if anything, I probably cut loose too soon. I think like that's my nature, is to sort of be like, okay, like this isn't really like getting traction like I want. Let's just move on. So I think I probably do that more than not. You know, you kind of fall somewhere on the spectrum where some people stick with stuff way too long. And I err on the opposite end of that spectrum, where it's like, okay, I tried it, didn't really work. Like, let's move on. Because there's 1,000 other things I still want to do. It's not that like, this didn't work, I don't know what else I'm going to do, but this didn't work, so I'm not going to do it. It's like, okay, well, like, there's other things that would be more interesting anyways. So like, there's no reason to keep trying this thing that didn't really, you know, get some traction. So I don't know. I think I can be decisive about this kind of stuff. Because to me, it seemed really clear. But, you know, so other people on the team, like, we had discussion, like some people wanted to keep it around either in the same capacity or like, let's try it in this other capacity or whatever. And it was just like, nah, let's move on.
That's just, I mean, it's quite a different approach to like a lot of people, especially founders who have invested a lot of time and ego, frankly, you know, in terms of trying to make something successful, that they are much more likely to just stick with it until it really dies and it hits them over the head with it, for fear of saying, you know what, actually this didn't work. And it's just do you get the sense that people who are more open with their kind of their journeys find it easier to move on from ideas that didn't work, and those who are a little bit more kind of closed keep things closer to their breast? Does that have an impact?
To me, it's just like, I don't feel attached to most projects. Like, there's some people who like look at their thing, it's like their baby, right? Like, they put all this time and energy into it. And to me, it's like, once I've decided that it's like maybe time to move on for something, like, I'll move on. Like, it's a pain to like even stick around to something that I've already decided I don't want to do anymore. So I'm not positive that like the openness has much to do with it. If anything, that's like, it kind of will confirm what I'm thinking about something if I talk about it. But for me, it's like being open is, it's like me working out a lot of my thoughts in public, but like, say if I write an article about it, the writing of the article is what was like therapeutic and helpful for me. The publishing part is just, I might as well publish it. But like, it's not that like the sharing it that has a lot of value for me. It's like the fact that I wrote it. Like, that's how like God figured it out, was by the writing process itself. And it just happens to be, I think, that like publishing that stuff ends up being helpful. And so that's cool. But yeah.
So like with Baremetrics, you have a section on your site where companies are invited to be open about their stats and share all their data. What sounds counterintuitive and for many companies, especially those even those who might be wanting to be transparent. Like this is the most intimate aspect of their business.
Sure.
How did you go about like introducing that and why? Like what made you do that?
Yeah, so I've had a bunch of projects, companies that I've started prior to Baremetrics, and like going through building all that stuff, there's always things that I wished I knew about running a company, or like especially what was sort of normal.
What does good look like?
Yeah, like I had no idea, because all you'd ever read about is something in like on TechCrunch or whatever about some huge company either raising a ton of money, making a ton of money, or like going down in flames dramatically. And so it's always just the outliers, like nothing, not the normal. Like I knew this is not normal what you're reading, but you just have anything else to compare it to.
Yeah.
So so when I started Baremetrics, so the real impetus of it was laziness, in that I built this product, I needed a demo of it, and I could either just fake tons of financial data, which programmatically totally possible, but I didn't, it was like that'd been a bunch of extra work, and I wasn't interested in doing a lot of extra work. So I said, well, why don't I just make my own stuff public, and like that'll be the demo, is the business. And so part laziness, part maybe altruism, in that I'm wanting to like give back to sort of show what's normal. And so that was the impetus of it. That was I think like February 2014.
Yeah.
And so, but then pretty quickly it took off. I mean, like it became a thing that people checked out a lot. And then it started, other companies who were previous to Baremetrics, like Buffer, for instance, was being very transparent before Baremetrics even existed. And I found their stuff very useful. So it was like, okay, well, let's jump on that bandwagon. Buffer was a Baremetrics customer. So like, they're like, hey, can we make our stuff public? Sure, why not? And so that kicked it up another notch, because they just have so much more exposure than Baremetrics did or even does now. So so that again, like got that whole movement more exposure, and for us that meant more customers, because people were constantly checking out Buffer's Baremetrics dashboard. That more companies want to get on board, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Cool. So in terms of what's next, or what it is that you're working on, like how does a project go from idea to let me spend some time working on this, in your mind?
Yeah, so at this point, I pretty much, projects that I work on now are rarely financially motivated.
Yeah.
Only because Baremetrics just pays the bills. I mean, right? Like it's where my paycheck comes from.
Yeah.
So I have, any other project falls under just me like doing something for kicks. And it's usually because I'm wanting to learn how to do something. So like, for instance, I have this like handmade like home goods things that I make. So a lot of times like planters, things you put in your house on a table. And so this is all made out of concrete. And like that started a few years ago from like me just being curious, like how would you make some of this stuff? Like you'd see some cool stuff in a store. It's like, how did they make that? So I decided I'm going to figure out how they make it. So I figured out how to make it. And, now I like a lot of weekends, especially like the spring and the fall, like I go to like farmers markets and like craft fairs and set up a booth and sell thousands of dollars of these things. So it's like, that's a really fun thing for me that I don't personally make any money from. Like it all just goes back into this like little holding company thing where there's money in that bank account, but I don't pay myself from it. Like I just put all the money back in to like it's like my problem here is like I have hobbies. I have a lot of hobbies, but I guess the benefit is like I really want to make those hobbies pay for themselves. So I do. So it's like, I explore all these like making things. I've got like a laser cutter and I'm making all sorts of
tweets.
Yeah, like laser cutting tweets and stuff like, and so that stuff all pays for itself. And
Yeah.
so cool, that's fun. Like it's not this like drain on my personal bank account. And I keep doing all those hobbies because they pay for themselves. So like that's a fun thing for me. It's like figure out how to do all that. But the impetus for any of those projects is like I want to figure out how that works. Like I've
Right.
got like been working on this like music industry simulation game for years. And that's because I'm like curious about like game mechanics and the
Mm,
economics of gaming and stuff like that. And so it's like, okay, let me build something to like
try it out.
figure that out. And that's usually where all that stuff starts from.
Cool.
Yeah.
So just finally, if people are watching that are either working on a little side project and they're considering whether or not to kind of take the leap and put a lot more time into it, try and make it pay the bills, what are the things that they should be keeping in mind, or what would your, I don't know, advice be when trying to weigh that up in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, I it depends on like what motivates you. So like, does the pressure of having to make something succeed in a certain amount of time motivate you, or does it like stress you out? Like I was talking to my daughter last night, helping her with some like math homework, and she was talking about how there had been this like math competition at school, and it was like this time based. So you had X number of like seconds to solve some like complex,
Yeah.
geometry problem, whatever. And and like I was thinking, we were both talking about how like that stresses us out, like just like. But some people, the guy who won like loved it, like felt really motivated by having this this pressure of the top of the clock running out.
Yeah.
And so for some people, if that's your thing, like if that really like lights a fire under you, then okay, like set some money aside, save up a few months worth of expenses, and then sure, go all in on like trying to make some project work. Like maybe that really does motivate you.
Yeah.
But other people like, no, that stresses you out and causes serious problems, especially if you've got like a family and a bunch of bills and stuff. So it's going to differ for everybody, but it's like figure out what motivates you to finish something or to like get to a certain point, like whether that's setting a goal or whatever. But don't like quit your job unless you've got some sort of plan in place.
Yeah.
Or unless that legit motivates you. And it also depends on like what you're in. So like if you're a designer or developer, like and you're working at a company now, the reality is like you can go get a job tomorrow anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's not risky for you to
Risk.
quit your
Yeah.
job, especially if you've got some savings and you can do that for a few months and see if it works out. Other positions that will be different, depending on your skill set. So I think it's about figuring out like what your motivation is, figuring out what your game plan is. Like if you need to make $10,000 a month from your project to like make it self-sustaining for you, then work backwards and figure out how you're going to get there, or at least the stuff you're going to try, and like just make a game plan. Like that's the biggest thing. Is too many people just like, okay, I'm going to make it work. Like what does that mean? Like you have to plan some stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's probably the biggest thing.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely, no problem at all.
Alrighty. Have a good day.
You too.